Good day, everyone. Great to see you all here. I'm Rob Tatro from robtatro.com, portfolio manager here at Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management and the Tatro Wealth Advisory Group. I'm excited for another edition of the Tatro Show. I will bring in our guest. We'll talk a little bit about his outlook on the real estate. So as a reminder, I am not your investment advisor. Do not take this as investment advice. If you do want investment advice on this, please go to speaktorob.com, www.speaktorob.com. We'd be happy to give you a no obligation consultation. All right, enough about that. Let's bring in our guest. I'll pause no further. I will bring him in. Luciano Diorio, welcome. Great to have you here. Managing Director at Cushman in Wakefield, Québec operations, an expert in his own right, young guy who's done a ton given, I say young guy, you mentioned it yourself, young guy, who's done a ton overseeing a pretty big team out there in the entire Quebec regions. He is the Quebec operations Managing Director. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Couple questions. I want to ask you about the future of office spaces. We touched on it earlier. Realistically, so you mentioned, collaborative spaces. You mentioned, maybe sharing offices. What do you anticipate in the future? Do you anticipate some reshaping of the traditional office model? And what does that look like?
So there's, short-term, medium, and long-term. I think certainly on the short-term, there's going to be just less people in the office, right? As I said, we're planning for, most companies are looking at about 20-25% return. So at this point, people will be sitting in their spaces that they left back in March, but there'll be 75% less people around them. As we move towards back, I guess, it'll be dependent on a vaccine. It'll be dependent on a treatment for COVID-19. That's where we're going to see what are the long-term effects on office space and office planning. There are some companies that have gone the route of open plan and they've looked at it and, in their sort of second iteration, they've maybe put in more closed offices. It all depends again on what you're doing as an occupier and what your main business is. For example, in brokerage, a lot of the times, we're on the phone 12 hours a day. And so sometimes we need the privacy of being in a more of a closed environment. Again, I think it'll be interesting to see as we move forward. But short term, we're going to see changes done within the space that is leased right now.
Okay. You had mentioned a term I had not heard of before when we were speaking offline. You mentioned office centricity. Can you explain what that is to us for the guests, for the viewers?
Yeah, sure. So that's basically a term that's come up over the last little while as to saying, our lives are not going to be dependent on this place called the office that are all going to kind of commute to and get to from a 9-to-5 perspective. And so we're not going to build our cities around this, and we're not going to be so dependent on this place called the office. And I think I touched on it before. I think that it's not a one size fits all. We're going to be in a situation where people will still want to be somewhere and go to a place. I think you had Vincenzo Guzzo on your show and I don't know if he mentioned about when people said Netflix, everyone's got Netflix at home, or everyone's got these streaming services, and he related it to kitchens in your home. He says, well, everyone's got a kitchen in their home, yet everyone's going out to restaurants and everybody's using restaurants. I relate that to the office situation. I think that, yes, we can work from home, and yes, we've proven that we can get connectivity and we can be productive. But I think that at one point we're going to want to be, and we're going to want to go into a place we call the office and collaborate. We may continue to have players that are working from home, and people will chime in from time to time and help us, reach our goals. But for a company and corporate cultures, I think that some are going to move back towards what we've seen up until now.
Yeah, Vincenzo was a good guest. A lot of life, a lot of activity. If you haven't checked it out, go to our YouTube page. If you're watching this on YouTube now, you should be subscribing. Click the red button, subscribe to our channel. You'll know of all the videos we got. We do a whole bunch of value videos, plus we do these. If you're watching this on YouTube or on Facebook right now, please take a second to follow, like our page. I want to ask you about the downtown retailers and retail, basically deconfinement. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So explain to me what downtown retailers and retail deconfinement means.
So the downtown retailers right now have been obviously, like all retailers in Canada, and certainly from my perspective in the Quebec market, have been clamoring to have their doors open again. And they've been asking the government to, relook at their stance and have them sort of come out of deconfinement. And up until now, you could only shop at like big box stores. You can only go to like a warehouse store or a department store that had opening onto the street without having to go through a mall. A lot of retailers, the mom and pop shops all along in your neighborhoods, were saying, I'd like to open too, and I can do the social distancing. So the particular situation in the downtown core of any city, but I look at the Montreal situation, is that those retailers depend on the traffic that comes from the office tenants, especially when you're walking down St. Catherine Street. Rob, if you remember being in Montreal, St. Catherine Street is a bustling on any normal day, but at lunchtime, it's really people come out of the office towers, and on a beautiful sunny day, we'll be walking down St. Catherine Street and pop into some of the retailers there. Those retailers, once they're going to be opened up again, as they have, they're depending on the people in the office towers. So if the people in the office towers are not there, obviously there's going to be some significant concern there from some of the retailers, because of course the costs are going to continue to pile up and their clientele is not going to be back necessarily. But I think this is going to be a short-lived. What's interesting is what downtown associations are doing, and ours in particular here in Montreal, is that they are trying to accommodate or doing programming that can basically attract people back to the downtown core, and also provide for bicycle parking, because one of the big concerns right now in this pandemic is using public transit. And in Montreal, the metro and the public transit system is very important part of Montreal, and a lot of people use the public transit system. And if people are nervous and afraid about using public transit, well, they're going to have to use other means to get to work. And one of them is people are looking at bicycles. Actually, bike shops, I don't know if this is a phenomenon across Canada, but certainly in Montreal, bike shops are running out of bicycles. They've sold bicycles probably as hot as pools right now. So this downtown merchants association here in Montreal is basically saying, we can come into downtown core, don't worry about public transit, you can bring your bike and we'll have like a valet service for your bicycle.
It's crazy that concept that you just mentioned, pools and hot tubs and bikes. So I went and waited in line for, I think it was an hour and a half or so, to buy a bike for my son who's growing up. And we did it like right when the stores opened here in Winnipeg, like one of the first ones. And it was a very, very different experience. And I spoke about it here on the show, but that was crazy. But I also have a buddy who owns a hot tub or a spa company. And he's telling me that, one, they can't keep them in stock because everyone wants to buy a hot tub right now because they're stuck at home. But two, they can't produce them because the manufacturing has pretty much fallen to zero for hot tubs because of COVID. They're all being produced, in Toronto or in Montreal or whatever, and they're having a hard time producing these hot tubs. So tough to get your hands on a hot tub. And who would have thought in 2020, tough to get your hands on a hot tub? But you're right. There's some weird things happening with the market.